Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, senors and senoritas, hola! Welcome to another edition of Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's get right to your questions. Brick Hard Slab, your Conan is slightly different than Howard's. Was that required or choice? Can they make your Conan books into movies or TV shows? Do you have a physical type you'd choose for your Conan? With Godzilla Minus One proving you can make a great movie for a reasonable price, do you think a foreign company could do your Conan justice? Is there a man who could play Conan? Maybe Henry Cavill if you could afford him. Henry Cavill, yeah, be an interesting choice. I'm sure he'd be into it. I mean, he's a fan of all this stuff. If he was a fan of Witcher series, he's certainly a Conan fan. He's got the physicality, and that's what you need. You need a tall guy with physicality, broad shoulders. Not necessarily a weightlifter kind of guy, but a guy that's been to the gym. Uh, Cavill could certainly play it. I don't usually play the casting game. What I'm curious about is how is my Conan different than Howard's? I don't think it is. It's certainly different from more recent depictions in novels. I try to hew as close as I can to Howard's original portrayal of Conan, his attitudes, his manner of speaking, um, his actions, how he reacts to things, his bleak sense of humor. So yeah, I'm kind of curious as to how mine is all that different. As far as movies, TV, and the rest, I mean, certainly they can be adapted. There's going to be some changes made. I don't want to say too much, but there's going to be some changes made vis-a-vis how these and where these stories are presented. I did write a third one. Now, as far as making low budget versions of these overseas, or mid budget, I should say, yeah, certainly. I mean, look at the Godzilla film. Uh, you know, Way too much is spent on movies. Let's face it. How do these movies cost as much as they do? It doesn't add up, and it's simply because um, producers and studios, they pay way too much for everything, because the people charging them, who are often sometimes the same people producing, um, the people charging them are charging exorbitant rates because they can get it. It's like dealing with the government. Hey, the government's got a bottomless pocketbook. We can charge as much as we want for things because we'll get the money. And the same used to be true of the studios, but now the studios are pinching pennies, looking for ways to save money because they're also freaking deeply in debt. I mean, I don't even know how some of them have avoided bankruptcy so far. So many of these big studios are billions and billions of dollars in debt. So I assume it's collateral. They got a lot of collateral, so maybe their debtors forgive them a little longer. But you got to think there's going to be a lot of people losing some money on these things because generally when these mega entertainment corporations start cutting the budget, it's not the big investors who get hurt, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I could see mid-budget Conan movies. I mean, I would prefer a mid-budget Conan movie. We don't need explosions. We don't need big casts. That said, the third Conan novel I wrote was it's got an opening battle sequence which would break the budget of any Hollywood studio. But they could always get around that by making it smaller. One mammoth instead of 50. So anyway, yeah, I mean, there's going to be some changes made in the way these novels are presented to you. Ian Potash, how have you been enjoying the presentation of the Dark Knight Detective series? I only nitpick. I have with the post-crisis reprint series, which includes the Cape Crusader and Nightfall 20th trade paperbacks, is that some volumes have extremely short print runs for no rhyme or reason. Batman Troika is so rare that it currently goes for almost $200, way more than the individual issues it collects. Is there some kind of conspiracy here? I think it's tone deafness on the publisher's part. These things are handled by Random House. They're not handled by DC, and I don't think Random House really cares. The stuff's presented to them, and They print whatever they feel will sell. And you're right, something like Troika, which was a relatively short arc shared between the three Batman titles running at the time, it wasn't a big event. We didn't promote it as a big event, and so it doesn't get collected in the numbers that a big event does. It doesn't get reprinted all the time. But I think what they're missing the boat on here is that um, people would like to have that continuous 90s run of all three major Batman titles in trade paperback form, and they don't appreciate it when there's holes in the collection, like Troika and like Prodigy and I'm sorry, what was the one collecting the Robins? So Prodigal, and also all the individual stories, the one-offs that never get collected anywhere. The Dark Knight Detective, I think, is making an effort to correct that by printing everything, as far as I know. As far as the presentation, yeah, it's affordable. It's a big chunky volume. Volume 8 here is the first one that really starts to delve into my contributions to Detective Comics. This volume is largely written by me, and I look forward to them continuing it. I like seeing my work collected. Sue me. But as far as a conspiracy, no, I think it's just mismanagement and not understanding that there's a ready audience for any Batman material from the 90s, not just the big event stories. So, sip of coffee. Alex Richmond says, so Stan the Man Lee is easily the most notable comic book writer. It's true. And is in turn responsible for many of the greatest storytelling innovations and some of the most notable characters in the comic book industry. He's also indirectly responsible for some of the comic book industry's worst trends, and is, in my view, the propagator of many of our most droll, self-indulgent modern comic book cliches which still permeate the industry to this day. What, in your opinion, are the most valuable writing lessons aspiring comic book writers can learn from Stan? And what are some of his worst writing habits which are best left avoided? Well, to start off with, the ones you want to avoid, and I can't blame Stan for this. Stan would make pop culture references in the stories, and this was like, Aunt May mentioning the Beverly Hillbillies in an issue of Spider-Man was like, whoa, whoa, it's like these exist in the real world, because comics up to that point, you know, existed on Earth 2 or Earth 612 or whatever. They were outside of our reality. They didn't relate to us. But Stan wanted it to give the appearance, the illusion that Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Thor, Iron Man, they exist in the same world we did, or at least a version of the same world we lived in. So they made references to the Beatles. They made references to Elvis and things like that. And these were fun and entertaining and sort of like a private joke we were all sharing. Now, Stan kept these pop culture references pretty rare. I mean, there's like one or two maybe in each issue of Spider-Man or FF or whatever. The problem is that when people went to ape Stan's style, when other writers came on board, because Marvel was exploding in the amount of content, Stan couldn't write everything. These writers would pepper their stories with pop culture references to the point where they're almost unreadable, where everyone is making is mentioning music or a book they read or TV show or movie that was popular at the time the comic was being produced, and it just gets tedious. And it's like you're doing this where Stan did it to sort of like make his characters seem more real. The other writers were doing it in place of writing actual dialogue. They were just borrowing. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time a writer wrote, "We're not in Kansas anymore," I mean, wow, please, never again. So that's like the worst thing Stan did, but you can't really blame Stan. You have to blame the people coming after him. Now, Stan wasn't entirely responsible for all this stuff. Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko were creative powerhouses. They were these furnaces and, nuclear reactors of creativity, especially in this time period. These guys were at the peak of their powers. They were still relatively young men, super enthusiastic, and Stan didn't have the time to write everything because the line was expanding, and Jack and Steve were virtually writing the books they were working on. I mean, and Steve actually was writing the book he was working on, and I believe Kirby was doing the same thing, where they would just figure out the story based on something they had discussed with Stan, or I think very often had not even discussed with Stan. It would be as simple as Steve saying, "Well, I want to bring the Green Goblin back." Okay, Steve, go for it. And it's up to Steve to populate the story with interesting characters, situations, suspense, traps, escapes, fights. It's all up to Steve. And we know from recent uncovered correspondence that Steve was writing these issues, and how he and Jack would do it is they would, write it as they went along, as they did the artwork. They would write in the gutters, and if you've seen original artwork from the period, you see this writing in the gutters around the panels, describing, making more clear for Stan what was going on in each panel, what the suggested dialogue, which Stan never used. He always came up with his own dialogue, but set directions, things like that, and for the guide Stan, so that when he dialogued the story, he knew what the hell was going on the page, what the point of the page was. And so it's not all Stan that came up with all this amazing stuff. I have to read. I'm not taking anything away from Stan. He was comics ambassador. He justly deserves being the most famous comic book writer ever, because he really did work his ass off for Marvel. No one can deny that. This guy was a hardworking dude. He didn't ask anybody to do anything that he couldn't do himself. So, not taking anything away from Stan, but you can't take anything away from Steve, Jack, and a lot of the other creators involved here. Now, what Stan did bring was a lot of heart, a lot of emotionality to the characters that really wasn't around in comics before this. That these characters are vivid and seem real, and have an emotional life. Like I said, heart. He wrote a lot of heart into these characters, and certainly, abetted by, Steve and Jack. But if you look at the evolution from the beginning of the Marvel Age of Comics over time, you can see Stan's contribution to the emotional life of these characters. It's not really present in the early issues of Spider-Man and Fantastic Four, and it becomes more and more present because now Jack and Steve are seeing the finished product. They're seeing, oh, this is where you were going with this, to Stan. It's seeing Stan's dialogue and how it related to the characters, and they began drawing to that. They began drawing more and more emotionally based stories, richer backgrounds. I don't mean backgrounds art-wise. I mean backgrounds for the characters. I mean, just bringing more, pathos to it, things like that. So if that's making any sense at all. So I think that while Jack and Steve certainly led the way, they were informed by Stan's writing as the process went along. Now, as far as creative engines go, it's easy to see that when Steve and Jack leave Marvel, Stan's work does not have the powerhouse, innovative feel that it had when they were still there. Their absence is sorely felt when they leave Marvel, because it wasn't all about Stan. And again, not to take anything away from Stan the Man, because he was the man. Hey, if you subscribed, thank you. If you haven't, please hit that button down below. It's helping to grow this channel. We're getting close to 10,000 subscribers, which they tell me is some sort of benchmark. The clouds will part. My life will be better. I'll sleep sounder. All kinds of wonderful things will happen if I hit 10,000. So please hit that button. Gene Pugno. More likely than not, you are familiar with the title by John Van Ham, not John Van Dam, John Van Ham and Philippe Franck, a Largo Winch. I just discovered this by accident when I saw the documentary and how Franck went to Hong Kong to collect references for one of the series. There are two movies made from the series, and one of them is titled Burma Conspiracy. Naturally, my interest was piqued, I assume because you're from Burma. And I ordered a DVD through Amazon, The Evil Empire. Yeah, I'm aware of these. Largo Winch is like an international globetrotting, born identity, Robert Ludlum kind of thing. And, well drawn, well put together. I've read a bunch of them. I can't remember a thing about any of them, which is kind of, to me, says something. I think I enjoyed reading them when I was reading them because I wouldn't have read more than one if I didn't. But I don't remember a lot about them. And I have seen both movies and I remember enjoying them, but I don't remember anything about either movie. I don't remember one single thing. I know I watched them. But that's true of so much on streaming, isn't it? Is there something special about streaming that makes you forget what you just watched? I don't know, but it feels that way. It feels that way because I don't remember any. I remember I enjoyed them while I was watching them, but I didn't take anything away from them. And for me, that's a problem with all of Van Ham's work. I don't like Thorgal, the long-running Thorgal, Vikings. You think I'd want to read all of them? I read a few, and it's like, I don't, yeah, okay, but I just had no desire to read any more. I don't know why they just didn't appeal to me. Obviously they appeal to millions of readers because these things are enormously successful with Largo Winch, and I think he does Agent 13, Thorgal. These are enormously successful comic series. They just don't speak to me. I think it's a lack of hormones. It's not in me, but that could be a problem. But it's a lack of hormones in the story. Maybe they don't get mean enough. I don't know, but I don't. I don't say stay away from them. You might enjoy them, meaning you, the general audience listening to this. They're just not for me. Kane Dorr, in a self-evaluation of our skill sets, aptitudes as a writer of fiction prose, what identifiers should exist that would indicate we have developed into a substantial professional writer? How do we know we have what we need skills-wise? What should we definitely be able to do? What should we not be doing? I don't do the how-to thing. I talk a lot about writing. I talk a lot about how I write. But if you'll notice, I never tell you how to write because I find that useless. It's not constructive. If you've ever read how-to books on writing, stop doing that. Read interviews with writers, read criticism, but don't let anybody tell you how to write. You write the way you want to write. There's as many different ways to write as there are writers. Now, how you can tell you've arrived is every writer has an anxiety that maybe I've written a check I can't cash. Like I've just pitched a story idea and they bought it, and now I got to write it. Can I do it? I mean, am I overreaching? Now, I know writers who won't overreach. They're in their lane. They know what they like to write. They're very successful at what they like to write. They just stay there. And then other writers, like myself, it's like, yeah, I've never written in that genre. Maybe I'll take a crack at it or come up with a high concept that will be difficult to deliver on. Recently wrote a story inspired by Cornell Woolrich. The story wasn't. It wasn't in the same genre. Cornell Woolrich wrote a chapter in one of his books from the perspective of a blind person. And I was like, whoa, that's tough. How do you write from the perspective of someone who can't see? And so I did a climax of a novel with the character blind, just to see if I could do it. And I think I was successful. My editors said it worked. They seemed to enjoy it. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I set that for me after decades of writing. I set that goal for myself, but I didn't worry about it. I didn't lose sleep. The beginning of my writing career, I would have laid awake all night. I wouldn't have been happy till I'd figured out how to do that. I would have had to write that chapter that day to prove to myself I could do it. Otherwise, I would worry. As it is, I had the idea, and I didn't write the scene. I didn't write that chapter for months. I would occasionally think about it, but it wouldn't worry me. And I think that's a sign that you reach that you're a professional writer and that you're going to have an actual active career, is when you don't sweat that stuff anymore. You just realize the idea will come. It'll either come naturally, it'll come when I'm out mowing the lawn, you know, it'll come to me in a dream somewhere along the line. And that's the secret I give everybody. I don't tell you how to write, but I tell you when to write, which is beat your deadlines. Don't go up against deadlines. Don't go anywhere near a deadline. Blow your deadlines out of the water, and that way you never have to worry about this stuff. You're not under any kind of a crunch. You can walk away and figure it out. But the overall thing I'm trying to say is that you've arrived when you don't have that writer's anxiety anymore. That, can I do this? When you've written enough, you realize it's going to come to me. It's going to work out. I can't think of a story that I just abandoned because I had no resolution to, or that I didn't eventually figure out how to make it work. And there's a million ways to do that I won't go into here. As far as advice to writers, Elmore Leonard put it best: don't write the parts that the reader will skip. But that said, I break that rule. If I have something I particularly want to impart to the reader, that kind of slows the story down or stops it momentarily. I don't mean like the chapter on whales in Moby Dick explaining cetology to people who didn't know anything about or care about whales. I don't mean stopping it dead entirely, but maybe just imparting something that I feel the reader would like to know or be interested in because I'm interested in. So I will do that. So see, even Elmore Leonard's rules can be bent. So just write the way you write. And if you write enough, eventually you'll know whether or not you're a professional writer by that anxiety disappearing. Or you decide you're the kind of writer who just wants to stay in his lane. I just want to write, stories about the gold rush. And that's all I care about. So do that. That's cool too. Michael Scambati. I heard your latest episode in your response to a question about Spielberg, and fun coincidence, you rewatched Jaws a few nights ago, and I rewatched Jurassic Park last week. Did you like Jurassic Park, book or film? I love the film as a kid and still maintain it's the best dinosaur movie ever, but curious to hear your thoughts. Yeah, I read the book before the movie. Funniest thing, I never, Michael Crichton originally wanted to call this Cretaceous Park because none of the dinosaurs in the story are from the Jurassic period. They're all from the Cretaceous period. And some Hollywood producer said, who's going to see a movie called Cretaceous Park? Let's call it Jurassic Park. I'd like that guy to explain the difference. Personally, I think Cretaceous Park sounds cooler than Jurassic Park. Anyway, the differences between the book and the movie are huge. And I prefer the book to the movie because of that. The theme of Crichton's work on Jurassic Park and its sequel are that extinction is good. It is good that the world has moved on, that the world is a better place without these dinosaurs in it. Spielberg's theme seems to be, well, it is. It's even stated either in this movie or the next one that life goes on. Life will always go on. Well, life hasn't gone on for 99% of the species that have existed on this planet. Eventually, every species goes extinct. So life does not go on and should not go on for, especially for creatures this dangerous. Do we really need? I mean, we're the apex predator on the planet. Do we really need someone to replace us? I just sort of an idiotic idea. And that sort of informs Spielberg's work, this ridiculous notion that life must go on no matter what. And it's made worse in the sequel Jurassic Park: The Lost World, which is one of the most aggravating movies ever made. It's just simply awful. It's just an awful movie. I won't go into it here. I'm sure I'll get questions. I'll probably go into it in depth in another episode. But the biggest gripe I have is that the Spielberg never wanted to see a dinosaur getting shot with a gun. Remember in the first Jurassic Park movie, we're introduced to this really cool guy, big game hunter, this tough Australian, and he dies off camera because he's got a gun, which he uses to try to kill the velociraptors, but fails. In Lost World, the Jurassic Park 2, they set up Pete Postlethwaite again as a big game hunter, and they set up the scene where he's going to go with this Nitro Express elephant gun, take on the two Tyrannosauruses that are stalking the human cast, and he once again he dies off screen. I'm sorry, a badass dude with a Nitro Express elephant gun. I want to see him. I want to see that. I want to see him going up against those T-Rexes because apparently in the story he took one of them down. Didn't you want to see that? Or did you want to see some more scenes of Vince Vaughn talking about saving the planet? Nothing against Vince Vaughn, but that character was aggravating. Even more aggravating than Vince Vaughn usually tries to make his characters. And then we get to Jurassic Park 3, which, I mean, I have a very unpopular opinion. This is my favorite of the Jurassic Park movies. Number one, it has a 93-minute running time, which a monster movie should have. It is a monster movie. It is nothing else. There's no real theme. There's no crybaby. There's no nothing. It has a good setup. It has good dinosaurs. It has good effects. It has characters I care about. It's not directed by Spielberg. It's directed by Joe Johnston, whose work I really admire. It has a terrific cast. But once again, Spielberg had say over this stuff, by cult of personality or whatever. And they changed the ending of the movie. Now, how do I know this? My buddy Rodolfo DiMaggio, who drew Green Arrow with me for a long time, drew Batman Predator 3. He went off to Hollywood and became, hugely successful doing storyboards and production artwork. And one of the earliest things he worked on was Jurassic Park 3. And we would talk on the phone and email back and forth, things like that, about the process, because I was fascinated with what he was doing. And he sent me tons and tons of Xeroxes of storyboards and production stuff. And he told me that the film was originally going to end, if you remember, the Spinosaurus was the big bad dinosaur in this version. It was going to end with the human cast making it out onto the beach to be rescued by United States Marines, as is sort of shown in the film. But in this version, the Spinosaurus chases them out onto the beach, where it is dispatched by an A-10 Warthog, an A-10 Thunderbolt Marine aircraft, which swoops down and takes out the Spinosaurus with the 20 millimeter minigun mounted in the nose of the Warthog. And that's how the movie was supposed to end. And Rodolfo said that he storyboarded it, he did some production art and everything else, and then they changed their mind. I was like, damn you, Steven Spielberg. And that's why they changed it, because Spielberg did not want to ever see a dinosaur being dispatched with a gun. And boy, did you, I mean, I want to see that scene. I want to see that scene. That would have been incredible. Anyway, that wasn't done. As a side note, Rodolfo said that there were constant rewrites, constant changes, to the point where they were flying him out to Hawaii to actually do art on the set, to help, do storyboards and stuff on the set to try to work stuff out, because Joe Johnston was really big on the storyboards and he really liked working with Rodolfo. He would ask for Rodolfo on every movie he made. Why not? Rodolfo's an awesome talent. But I remember him complaining to me about it. He goes, "Oh, I gotta fly to the set this weekend." And I'm like, poor baby, you got to fly to Hawaii and hang out with Tia Leone for the weekend. Oh, you poor thing. My heart goes out to you. So, anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts on the Jurassic Park movies. Probably more than you needed to hear, but yeah, I prefer the books. And I don't necessarily think I prefer King Kong, the Peter Jackson King Kong, because they actually shoot some dinosaurs, which is what I would do if I saw a dinosaur. I would shoot it. Oh, David Jordan, is there any plans to get at least a digital copy of The Vanishes in English out there? I have a scan, only way I could find it. And the art looks great, but it's all in Spanish. Um, yeah, Vanishes is a graphic novel I did a number of years ago. It's a very much a young adult kind of thing, young adult novel kind of thing about kids time traveling. And yes, there will be a digital version. I'll tell you more about it later, but we are planning a digital version, possibly in color for the first time. So I will tell you more about that down the road. Kenny Todd, you talked about how you and your wife having ideas for an Addams Family comic. It got me thinking: has your wife ever gone with you to a convention? If so, what did she think of all the fans wanting your autograph? You also said she has a few writing credits for your SpongeBob work. Has anyone ever asked her for her autograph, and how did she feel about it? I have never taken my wife to a comic book convention. She's not really into comics at all. She doesn't. If you asked her, she wouldn't even be able to tell you what I was currently writing, and I like it that way. I have a separation. Um, she only comes in the picture creatively. She's a very creative person. When I'm working on a franchise that she likes or feels she can contribute to, she plotted a whole bunch of Simpsons stuff for me. She came up with these great high concept plot lines, which are a requirement for The Simpsons. A fresh plot line. And she would come up with these great, usually starting with, have they ever done this? Or has Marge ever done this? Or has Homer ever done this? And then she would just blue sky, just lay it all out. And I would pitch it and they would buy it. So a lot of my Simpsons plot lines, many of which credited to her, um, they were her idea, brought to life by me. It was scripted by me. But yeah, she's never into the comic book scene, and I never subject her to taking her to a convention. She's never, well, I'll tell you a story. Early on, when Tom Lyle and I were working on stuff, we were doing store appearances around the area. We were living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at the time, both of us, in separate houses. We were both married, living in Lancaster, and we were doing store appearances. And sometimes go down to Maryland, sometimes over to New Jersey, places all around Pennsylvania. Pushing the comics, out to the Mid Ohio Con, and we traveled a lot together because we were working for Eclipse and then on Robin. And one time, the wives dropped us off at the store and said they'd come back later when the store appearance was done. I believe this is in Maryland. So they took off. They went down to the Owings Mill Mall, and they hung out there. They got lunch and did some shopping. And when they came back, they had concocted this idea that they would pretend to be our biggest fans. And so they show up at this store appearance and acting like a pair of giddy teenagers, and like we were some kind of rock stars, just making a huge fuss over how much they loved our work and they had to get our autographs. Just embarrassed the hell out of Tom and I. And of course, the ladies had the time of their lives. They couldn't stop laughing at us. And everyone in the store was just sort of standing there gobsmacked because they'd never seen anything like this before. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Another explanation or another illustration of my wife's total enforced ignorance about comics. I wrote a haunted tank story, which turned out sadly to be the last haunted tank story Russ Heath would ever draw. But I wrote a haunted tank story, and I wasn't sure the story worked. So I I explained it to my wife. I said, this happens, then that happens, that happens. And she says, no, I like the story, but the idea of a Civil War general haunting a tank, that's stupid. Well, sorry, that's baked in. I can't get away from that idea. So that's sort of an explanation. Now, like I said, she worked like you had mentioned. She worked with me on SpongeBob, although for whatever reason they wouldn't allow her to be credited because they weren't actually paying her. She was providing me with the plots. Bongo was nicer about it. They allowed her name to be on the script. So if you ever see E. Blackburn on the Simpson scripts, that is my wife. So yeah, she helped a lot with SpongeBob because she was familiar with the show, as both of us were, because we had kids at exactly the right age when SpongeBob came out. So we had seen a lot of the show. She knew all the characters and their interrelationships. And once again, it would begin with, has Mr. Krabs ever? And then she would just blue sky this whole high concept story, which, when you're working on things like SpongeBob and The Simpsons, I mean, it's all got to be high concept. I mean, it's all about the plot. And she was enormously helpful. And I got to say, the high watermark, and this is her proudest achievement, was the Cat Lady story in Simpsons 176. And she's proud of it, but it's also a bittersweet feeling because they pretty much stole the story and used it on the Simpsons TV show. When I say steal, of course they didn't steal it; they owned it. We signed away the rights when we cashed the check. But they did borrow it without credit, I should say. Sort of like, well, they're all from Harvard. I think that's what they do at Harvard. They just borrow other people's work without crediting the original person. But she's very proud of this story and should be, because it's a great story about the infamous Cat Lady of Springfield. Dwayne Thomas. I don't believe I've ever seen you answer this question on Ask Chuck Dixon, which I find a bit amazing now that I think about it. What do you think of Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns? My opinion, I hated it in 1986. I hate it today. There was way too much stuff in there that was degenerate and quote unquote shocking, just for the sake of being degenerate and shocking. I mostly hated the treatment of the relationship between Batman and Superman, which was a complete inversion and, to my mind, betrayal of everything that had gone before. It always struck me as almost poetically correct, that the two greatest heroes of an age should be the best of friends. But suddenly Superman is a government stooge, Batman despises him and is literally stomping him into the dirt. Oh, please. I was amazed at the time that Miller was allowed to get away with that. Though today, this sort of disrespect for history and continuity and prior characterization has become the norm. The Dark Knight Returns was a real pioneer in that level of idiocy. Yeah, I mean, I understood what DC was trying to do. They were trying to expand the brand, grow it up. Unfortunately, growing it up to a comic creator means making it, as you said, degenerate and shocking, rather than, paying more attention to deft characterization or clever plotting or any of the rest of it. It just sort of fetishized, the franchise, uh, taking it to a level of violence that, I didn't really like. I didn't appreciate. I liked at the time that they were experimenting, um, but I did not like the results of the experiment. And it's funny because you look at it today, but boy, it's wordy, and there's a lot of reliance on like TV news people to explain what's going on, things like that. And I've never been impressed with Miller's art. Um, I think Klaus Janson does an amazing job covering up Miller's deficiencies as an artist, and he does so here. And the coloring in it was brilliant. I mean, it was a great looking package, but I agree with you overall. It sent the wrong message. And what I'm most grateful for is, Denny O'Neil was editor on this, but also edited the regular line. He was a Batman Group editor. He didn't alter the line to reflect Dark Knight Returns. The Batman titles remained on the course they were on of telling classic Batman stories, and this was Dark Knight Returns was to be kept out of canon, out of continuity. This is basically an Elseworld story. This is a what if, an imaginary tale. And it remained that way for a long time until a new generation of writers who grew up on this thing decided that they wanted to make the regular Batman comics closer to the feel of Dark Knight Returns, which is unfortunate because it was a law of diminishing returns. Yes, it's popular for a while, but um, who wants a steady diet of that kind of story? Uh, the answer is not many people want a steady diet of grim, dark, degenerate, and shocking Batman stories. Harold Pridemore. Why does it seem some people can write Marvel stories? When they get to DC, it seems they just blow it. I love this question. I've never really thought about this, but you're right. You have people that are successful at Marvel, they go over to DC and they just can't make it work. Um, there really is a difference between the two companies. And maybe not so much anymore. I see current output from DC and Marvel, and it all kind of looks the same to me. Poorly crafted and self-indulgent and boring. But back in the day, there was a different feel at the two companies. Larry Hama explained it to me. He said that DC and Marvel are different in a way. Since the early '60s, the difference between the two companies is that DC is goofy. At the heart of it, it's goofy. It has detective gorillas and things like that. These imponderables, ridiculous elements. Superman there's so many ridiculous elements. It's hard to count, and that's the charm of DC Comics. Getting back to Dark Knight Returns, that's a mistake. It was a mistake for DC to turn down this pathway toward more grim, and the word I hate, gritty stories, because they were moving further and further away from what made DC Comics charming. Their goofiness, the core silliness of the stories. Which, there's lots of ways you can play that. I mean, I wrote Batman for many years and ancillary characters with the knowledge that at the bottom of it all were ludicrous premises, and we were all just having fun with it. So that was DC, goofy. Over at Marvel, the difference was that all the Marvel characters came from a place of a self-effacing Jewish sense of humor. And it's like, yeah, Peter Parker, Ben Grimm, Nick Fury, all these characters, with the exception of Daredevil, which seems to very much come from a lapsed Catholic point of view, of a worldview of Catholicism and Catholic guilt, although Jewish guilt, but they're different. But anyway, and Larry was right. That was at the core because of it. If you think of Mel Brooks or Woody Allen, there's very much that sense of humor running under the Marvel characters, which gave them their own appeal and their own lasting relatability and the rest of it. And I think when you move from the one to the other, you can't, you don't want to make Marvel comics over goofy, and you don't want to have that self-effacing humor with the DC characters because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Superman, Batman, The Flash, Catwoman, Green Lantern, they're all comfortable in their own skins. They're all confident, alpha characters who don't question their own motives and all the rest of it the way Marvel characters do. So there you have it. I mean, if you look at DC and how many writers write the characters that are in therapy or they're having some sort of inner crisis, and it's like, that's Marvel. That's not DC. So I hope I've made that somewhat clearer. Mike Coville. My question is, do you think comic stories are struggling because there's no ending? Has Batman fought the same crime enough time and should be retired or killed? Uh, no. Batman needs to evolve. And that is the problem with all of these long running characters. You were not meant to read them for decades, you were meant to outgrow them. And yeah, I know I'm an adult comic book fan. I'll always be a comic book fan. You're an adult comic book fan. You'll always be an adult comic book fan. But we should not be the core readership. We should not be the majority. Well, we are the majority now, and look where we are. Sales suck. Sales are terrible. We should be the smallest portion. The dedicated comic book fan should be the smallest portion of the comic book readership. What we need to do is we need to get kids to read them. This is why manga is kicking all of our asses. Nothing against manga. I'm glad kids are reading manga because at least they're reading comics. But we lost a couple of generations by leaving the newsstand. And we never got them back and never tried to get them back. With the arrival of the direct sales market, comics were created for comics fans only, not the casual reader. Forget the casual reader. We're going to get these fans and we're going to give them the comics they want till the day they die. Well, till the day they die, they don't live forever. Or they get into financial straits and have to sell their collection and can't afford to buy your $7 22-page comic anymore. These things happen. So they purposely shrank the audience. And when they should have left it alone, let market forces take over, which means keep appealing to kids. And then those kids grow up, they discover the opposite sex, or they discover cars, or they start thinking about college, and they leave comic books behind. And their little sister, their little brother, their cousin inherits their comic book collection, and it begins again. So every few years, you have a new audience, just like with children's books. I mean, there's nobody in their 50s still reading Dr. Seuss, I hope, unless they're reading it to a child. But Dr. Seuss is brand new to a new generation of kids. Every year, millions of kids are exposed to Dr. Seuss for the first time. And that's how Dr. Seuss has a lasting effect on our culture. That's why it still sells, because it's a new audience buying it, not the same audience over and over and over again. And that's what needs to happen. And when I was a kid, because I was a kid reading comics and read them into adulthood, because I'm an adult fan, I'm an admirer of the medium, I saw these changes. I saw these changes happen. I saw Batman move from the Dick Sprang era to the New Look era, because there was new readers who had new expectations of what Batman should look like because of the TV show. So they made these changes. Spider-Man also evolved over time, changed its look, changed its tone. But now we're just sort of stuck in this doom spiral where the characters either can't change at all, or are being changed beyond all recognition to get attention from outside media, which does nothing to sell any comics. So I know I'm all over the map here on this answer, but that's the key. No, these characters shouldn't be killed. No, yes, the story never ends. It never should end, because you should be producing new material for new audiences all the time. They used to tell us at DC, right? Every issue is if it's a person's first comic, because invariably it will be a person's first comic. And I hear this all the time. People say, oh, the first thing I ever bought was, and it's in the middle of one of my arcs. But they bought it, and because I wrote it to engage them from the first page, even though they were in the middle of a story, they still enjoyed it and wanted more. They got what was going on in the story early and continued on, even though I was in the middle of a plot line. And it's like, oh, it's my favorite comic ever. You don't even know how the story began, or eventually you found out how it began. So I hope I've made myself understood here. We need new readers, and we need to evolve the characters, and we need to think about those new readers and what their expectations are, and change the characters to suit them, or change the characters, make them more appealing to them, to meet their expectations and exceed their expectations, instead of going back to the same old shrinking pool of dedicated comic book readers, dedicated comic book fans, like you and me. Nothing against you and me. We love the comics, but you can't build a business on that. There's just not enough of us. Terrence James, any advice on writer's block? How do you keep going and having a seemingly endless stream to keep writing? Sometimes it takes me up to a month or more to complete just one single chapter. But then I see you, Chuck, or Eric, and you guys seem to be able to endlessly just write nonstop. How do you do it? Well, I mean, everybody sets their own pace. Now, you're saying you took a month to write one chapter. Is this the first thing you've tried to write? Um, I can sympathize. I played around with prose in the 90s because DC was starting up a thing where they were having novels based on comic book characters, and I couldn't get anywhere. It just wasn't working for me. It wasn't coming together. It was the genre. Writing about superheroes in prose just didn't seem right to me after writing about them in comic books. Having to describe the crazy things they were doing rather than having an artist draw them, I was at a loss. So I dig it. So is this the first thing you've worked on, or are you a professional and writing is this hard for you? Writing is hard for some people. It's not for me. If anything, it's gotten easier, and it's become more and more of a compulsion. But remember, writer's block is something you can talk yourself into. My advice is, first of all, stay way ahead of schedule. As I said before, stay way ahead of deadline, and you won't have writer's block problems because you'll have time. There won't be the pressure. The calendar will not be weighing down on you. You'll have time to take a break, take a walk, go for a swim, take a nap, whatever, and just not worry about it, and you'll get going again. Boy, if I could ever write the brilliant stuff I've thought of while taking a shower, but by the time I get to the word processor, it's like 70% of the energy that I thought of brilliant stuff, it's all gone, and I had to write a pale imitation. But as I often say, writing is requires a mix of ignorance and confidence. You can't be questioning yourself. You just have to go for it. And the best advice I can give on writer's block is just don't indulge in it. Don't believe in it. It's an impasse that you should not put in front of yourself, because that's what you end up doing. It's like, oh, I'm struggling. The struggling writer, there's nothing more tedious than the struggling writer. Maybe the starving artist or musician is more tedious, but the struggling writer, you don't want to be around that person. You don't want to be that person. So just relax. It'll come to you. It's unusual advice for a writer, but don't think too hard about it. Just let it happen. So anyway, twin spin, Terrence. Ba-boom. Do you see any hope on things getting back to track concerning all the wokeness going on everywhere right now in the USA? Sometimes I feel things might be bleak, and other times I have a sliver of hope, because as of recently, we are seeing more and more that people, including those who may not have been caught up in all, going on rejecting this stuff in greater numbers. Disney's recent massive failures at the box office, as well as other things, it seems there is a turnaround happening, but is it too little too late, as there is still a lot of damage and still a lot to clean up? Yeah, it's largely too late. It's too late for mainstream comics. They peed in the pool, and now they got to swim in it. To torch the analogy further, the water level's going way down. There's not much room left to swim in anymore. There's not much water. It's all pee. And they designed it that way. They went on a suicide mission, a kamikaze mission to ruin comics. And then this is the end result. Massive failure at the box office. Nobody in the history of cinema has screwed it up as bad as Disney. The other studios are trying to be as bad as Disney, or were trying. They just took this down the road to where it was always going to have to end. Third wave feminist crap presented as entertainment, and nobody wants it anymore. What they also should have seen, which they should have learned from the history of Hollywood, and the history of pop culture as a rule, fads end, cycles end. You know, we love spy movies, and then 2 months later we hate spy movies. Oh, we love westerns. We don't want to see that anymore. We love rude comedies. We're tired of them now. And this is what happens. And Disney, in particular, the lords of wokeness, have destroyed everything that Walt built, and they're bankrupt. I mean, they're not literally bankrupt. They're not in bankruptcy court, but boy, are they in debt. Now, Walt had been there before. Walt had bankrupted Disney over and over and over again, but always creatively managed to pull out of it. And always the reason why he went bankrupt was in the pursuit of quality entertainment. Pinocchio bankrupted the studio. But boy, is it a hell of a movie. And that's all Walt really cared about in the end. I mean, Pinocchio, for me, is the high watermark of everything Disney ever did, because of the attention they paid to it. And see, they thought they had laid the golden egg. They thought, like Disney and so many of these other franchise holders, that, oh, the audience, they love Snow White. They love our crap. So they're going to love whatever we put out. And they put everything into Pinocchio to make it like the best animated feature you could possibly imagine. And it is. It's glorious. It's amazing. But the audience didn't respond to it the way they did Snow White. And then the double barrel was they put out Fantasia, and it drove them into bankruptcy. And but Walt figured out a way out of it. They did Dumbo. Dumbo was a short feature. It was almost a featurette. And it's still excellent quality. Dumbo's, but didn't cost as much. They cut some corners, not corners you can see on the screen. And they put it out, and it was hugely successful. And it saved the company. The same way that Walt Disney World, the Wonderful World of Disney, on TV, coming on TV, financed the debacle that was Disneyland. Disneyland was a loss leader, lost millions and millions of dollars. Nobody was going to Disneyland. It was a failure until that TV show came on, gave Walt the financing he needed to stay out of the red, not have to sell the company, and bring more people to Disneyland, because every week they had an hour-long commercial for the park. So Walt was great that way. People running Disney now don't have a freaking clue. They think they're the smartest people in the room, and they never, ever are. And this is stretched from the box office because of wokeness, to the theme parks, to every aspect of their business. Empty theme parks, cruise ships, merchandise sales. Now, merchandise was always Walt's thing. Walt spent a fortune on Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck cartoons, more than anybody. He was spending money on Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck 7-minute cartoons. They were making features at the studios for the amount of money he was spending on those little shorts. And they made it all back in merchandising. None of those cartoons ever made any money at the theaters because he spent so much money making them. But he knew the better the cartoon, the more toys will sell. And they've lost even that formula. So, but they're not the only ones. I mean, Paramount is deeply in debt, tens of millions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars in debt, and trying to figure their way out. But even they're clueless. I mean, they're trying to turn it around, but they don't have the first idea how to do it. Now, the only shining star at Paramount at the moment is Yellowstone. Yellowstone is a global television phenomenon. It's huge. Everywhere it's shown, it's huge. It's basically, it's on a streaming service, but it gets the kind of numbers that hit TV shows in broadcasting used to get. It's undeniably the king of dramas on television. In addition to that, it sells a buttload of merchandise, high-end merchandise, jewelry, clothing. It has to be in the billions. This is globally. And of course, they turn to Taylor Sheridan. They want more and more out of this guy. I don't know when he sleeps. And each thing is successful. Each thing has a life of its own. Mayor of Kingstown, 1923, 1883, all these various spin-offs and everything else, hugely successful. Um, so what what does Paramount do? Well, we're going to build off this Yellowstone thing, and they give George Clooney a production deal, big multi-million dollar production deal to produce TV series for them. Based on what? his former success as a movie and TV producer? No, this is his name. But he's produced stuff that's bombed. I mean, huge, lost millions of dollars for the studios that he produced them for. But why would you turn to George Clooney? It's like, it's right here. It's right here in front of you. Find the new Taylor Sheridan. Think outside the box. I mean, you didn't seek out Taylor Sheridan. He dropped in your lap. Go find Craig Zoller and throw a busload of money at him to come up with a new TV series for you. There's a bunch of really creative, really terrific young filmmakers, young TV producers and stuff like that you could be turning to, but you're going to go to George Clooney, a guy that I don't think anybody cares about. And this is going on all over Hollywood. All the big studios are in trouble. The guy at Warner's, David Zaslav, he's doing an amazing job, I think, of rescuing Warner Brothers. He's selling stuff off. He got Netflix to pay through the nose for Band of Brothers and the Pacific. He's brought down their debt load by $9 billion. Yeah, that's how much money they owe. That he brought down $9 billion. He's got a lot more to go. He renegotiated their interest rate. He's canceled projects and written down projects and taken tax breaks on stuff that he knew was never going to make any money. It was just going to cost him more money. They stopped airing things that they were paying royalties on, but nobody was watching. So, but that's the road all these studios are going to take. And it's all going to change because some of these studios are not going to be able to get out of the hole. They're not going to, some of them are digging the hole deeper, like Disney. They're not. So there's going to be changes. I mean, Disney right now, there's going to be a stockholder revolt. I see a hostile takeover this year because you have stockholders who are ticked and they want a new board at Disney. And I agree with them because one of the things going on at Disney, maybe you haven't heard about this, is that the board members at Disney, these are the board members at Disney, altogether, all of them only own $15 million in stock in Disney. Now, these people own, hundreds of millions of dollars in stock in other companies. So they don't care what happens at Disney. They're not going to lose their house. They're not going to lose their car. Their kids aren't going to have to quit college because Disney fails because they have very, very little invested in Disney. Whereas stockholders who have $1 billion in Disney really, really care that the company remains healthy, that they stand to lose a big part of their fortune if Disney continues down this path of destruction. And so, it's got to turn around financially, but can it? And what will it look like afterwards at all of these studios? What will the world of entertainment look like? Well, I'll tell you one indication is there's more horror movies in production right now at all the major studios than ever in the history of cinema. Why? Because horror movies cost less and earn more, and they have more international appeal. So they can sell easier overseas. So they're all making horror movies because they got to make that cash. Now, that's not really going to take them out of the hole, is it? I mean, but at least they've stopped the bleeding there. We're seeing the return of Westerns, which can be done mid-budget. Westerns with big-name actors, because it turns out in streaming and in the streaming world, Westerns people like them, and they want to see them. Internationally, again, Westerns are an easy sale. People overseas love American Westerns, and so they're going to make more of them. The success of Jack Reacher. Someone I know who's a Hollywood player, big name, he's in the mix. He literally told me last year, he says, well, the straight white male is back, that the studios are going, we want stuff with straight white males in them. The diversity, inclusion, and equity, that thing's over now. It's at most of the studios, not Disney. And Disney's hiding that they're still into the DEI. But so Jack Reacher, hugely successful. Terminal List, hugely successful. So this is pointing the way to a return to normalcy. I'm not saying like every show should feature white people, but you can't leave white people out of the mix. I'm sorry, because they do form a large part of the audience. And the other thing is that you don't want to cast for diversity ever. You just want a badass. If you're making badass action movies, you want a guy who's a badass in the lead role. And yes, and it doesn't work for everybody. Yes, Denzel as a badass, love it. Jamie Foxx, not so much. Not so much of a badass. So it really doesn't matter, diversity, but you don't want to exclude the white guy because you might be casting, a person of color that you would prefer because you want to get the credits, you want to get the high fives at the next production meeting for casting due to inclusion. So you recast the white male character as a female of color, but maybe they're not right for the role. They're not Pam Grier or Michelle Yeoh. Maybe they suck, and you would have been better off going with the white guy or the white chick that closer filled the bill or met audience expectations. So giving Hollywood less options like that, and isn't that really the problem? That DEI restricted the options that Hollywood had in responding to audience expectations, and the end result is what we're seeing now: a debacle, a massacre at the box office, a massacre in the streaming services. Now, to me, the real bellwether of whether or not this is all really going to change and they're really serious about doing escapist entertainment once again is if we see the return of the mid-budget comedy, the comedy that only cost 15 million, 20 million to make, and come out there and earn. Not a romantic comedy or whatever else, just a return to the mid-budget comedy movie. And when you think about it, every comedy movie made in recent years, there haven't been that many dedicated comedies. They're either extremely low budget with a cast of people you never heard of, or they're pumped up as a $150 million summer blockbuster, which isn't necessary. You don't have to spend a lot of money to make me laugh. But to me, that's the bellwether. The return of the mid-budget comedy will be the signal that they're serious about turning this ship around. Power of Grayskull. Oh, who I have to thank for this week's thumbnail image of the cat with the flamethrower. What are each main character of Alpha Core's power set? The men can fly and seem to have super strength, but Valdez seems to have some sort of laser rope whip things, which are cool and all, but I'm going to need some more information about them all, please. What am I missing, if anything? Well, I mean, the Alpha Core characters have, standard superhero powers. We don't talk much about origins or sources yet. I have written the origin story for Brian Solari. It'll be appearing in a project which you'll be seeing next year. And that will continue to show, that project will continue to explore origins of other characters as well, how they got their powers, what their powers are specifically. But taking on this series, I mean, Braxwell and Brian are, they have those standard powers. Braxwell moves faster. He can move faster, but his powers are basically the same as Brian's. And Ingrid's powers are, like you said, those, electromagnetic whips that she can produce. And all will be explained as the Rippaverse expands and grows, because we get together, we talk about this stuff. We've been having, as the universe grows, as we're building the world out, there are more and more meetings amongst all of us, Zoom calls and stuff like that. A couple of weeks ago, I met the Saska sisters on a Zoom call. Mike Barron will be joining us soon. and making contributions. We're scheduling, basically a tele-summit in a couple of weeks to explore more of this. But we're all, very carefully moving along, building, reading each other's stuff, trying not to get in each other's way, trying to create stuff that all of us can use. And, you know, it's work in progress. Now, this isn't a question or anything else. I just want to recommend a movie I saw that maybe passed you by or you never heard of. It's called Baby Assassins. It's a Japanese action comedy that I thought really worked. I thought it was unique and different. And my oldest boy, who keeps up with this stuff, he told me that this movie only cost $100,000 to make, and every penny of it is on the screen. This goes along with what I was saying earlier. I mean, you don't have to spend that much money to make a good movie. This movie's got all the bells and whistles you would want in a dark action comedy. It's about two girls they're teenagers. Only in Japan would they come up with this plot line. They are teenage assassins. They work for an assassination agency that hit people, and they're coming of age. They're turning 18, and so they have to enter adult life. And the agency has told them, well, you need a background. First of all, the two of you have to move in together and be roommates. And secondly, you got to get jobs so that your income is reflected on a tax form, which is a hysterically funny premise. And it works all the way through this thing. The two girls do indeed do that. And much of the story involves them applying for and getting and failing at part-time jobs because of their, let's say, nihilistic attitude toward public safety and other people's feelings. And because they are sociopathic characters, but the complications of the story, and I always love this kind of story, is they get on the wrong side of a yakuza crime lord and his two psychotic children, and problems ensue. But my biggest recommendation for this movie, it's fun throughout, it's funny, it's different, it's quirky, is the climactic fight. And this female, the one female of the hitman team has to fight a guy who's a head taller than her, has 30 pounds of weight on her, and reach. I know what you're going to say. Oh, those fights are always so unbelievable. Not this one. Not this one. She's petite. She's smaller than him. She's got all the disadvantages, and all of them are shown in the fight. I mean, she gets the living hell beat out of her, but she's got one strategy to defeat this guy if she can only employ it. And it made the whole scene believable. And it is a hell of a fight. Because of the low budget, they couldn't afford a lot of camera setups and everything else. And that's an asset to this movie because you get a lot of long takes of the two actors going at it in this fight. And they're extremely athletic and extremely skilled. And it's just, but the fight is believable. There's no wire work. There's nothing else. It's just the two of them going at it in a beautifully, wonderfully, one of the best fight scenes I've seen in years. And most believable. So I highly recommend it if you can check it out. It might be streaming somewhere. I don't know. I bought a Blu-ray. So, physical media. Bruno Bookstores at gmail.com. Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com. That is the way to reach me for questions and suggestions, pictures of kitty cats, and all the rest of it. Especially those kitty cats are armed. While I got you checking out My Sister Suprema at ArcTunes, you should. Or you can buy the first volume of My Sister Suprema's Origin issue on Amazon. And you should check it out, but it's free on ArcTunes, and there are new episodes coming up from ArcTunes. So, hey, I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for watching, liking, subscribing, all the rest of it. And I'll see all of you down the road.